All right, welcome everybody to this workshop. We are going to talk about data today. My name is Yulia Kosarenko. I am author of the book, Business Analyst, a Profession and a Mindset. I'm a business analyst, business architect. I teach analytics courses for Humber College. So I have lots of interests, especially about how business analysis and project management and data governance all intersect. So today's webinar is really for business analysts, for project managers, and for leaders, and for everyone, because data touches all of us, and it is important regardless of what role we play in a project. I did run a survey before planning this webinar where I also ask you for various questions that you would want to have answered. So just a quick note at the end of the presentation, I will answer, I think I have 6 questions that came through that I want to answer at the end of the webinar. As always, use comments. I'll try to monitor all the comments and see what's happening, and we will get started. So what does every analyst, manager, and leader needs to know about data and about analytics? And of course, we know that analytics is on everyone's mind, but especially AI tools are on everyone's mind in this year. And we're all also trying to figure out, what does AI mean? Does it change how we do things? How will it change our approach to managing data? So I've done a little experiment for this webinar today, and I decided to give it a try with one of the AI tools and see if it would generate a presentation for me. So I can see here, there's a little note here, it says made with Gamma. So what I've done is I've included all of my main points that I wanted to cover in the presentation, just plug them into that tool. It did spit out a very nice looking presentation for me. And in the end, I'm using the design from that presentation. But just to let you know, I ended up rewriting most of it. And it's just kind of the underlying idea for our webinar today and for what I wanted to chat with you today. The best tools are not going to be creative. They're not going to come up with something new for you. Every AI tool will just kind of regurgitate and recreate and retell things that we already know. So what I've done is I've said, okay, it's a nice design. I'm going to use the design, but I rewrote every point the way I wanted to say it. So that was just my little history of how I prepared for the webinar today. So let's talk about data skills that analysts, leaders, and managers need to know first. So we'll start with business analysts and with business analysis. How do we use data for business analysis? What are the data skills needed for business analysts and why? So first of all, and the most important one, is we do want to produce and capture effective requirements. That is still one of the main purposes of why we need business analysis on the project, whether it's done by analysts or by someone in a different role. Every project needs to have quality requirements, and there are no projects that do not need data-related requirements. So those related to data management. So we'll cover a few examples today, but think about ensuring that data management requirements are included. If we miss them, that's where we create all of those data problems later. Also, projects, when they first worked on and when business analysis efforts are happening, especially at the beginning, often they miss analytics requirements altogether. Everyone will be so focused on business processes and business flows and entering the data, they will forget that analytics is needed at the end of it all, at the end of this whole flow, to measure the success, to measure what is happening. And I've been on many projects where almost as an afterthought at the very end of the project, someone will say, oh, we have to capture data requirements or data reporting requirements as well. And as you start talking about analytics at the end of the project or at the end of your requirements phase, you will discover that you're actually missing some important data points that you would need for your analytics. So not thinking about analytics well in advance also results sometimes in gaps in your product or not being able to capture the data which would be essential for those analytics. So those two things, data management and understanding what analytics and metrics your process or your project is going to need, and thinking about it early on, can be pretty detrimental for your projects. The other area for business analysts is using data to make your business analysis better. And this is another area where sometimes we don't necessarily think this way. We think about business analysis as asking questions, interviewing stakeholders, running workshops. So we're thinking of asking stakeholders about what do you need, what are the requirements, what is the flow. And sometimes we forget that we can also use data, use it to complement the requirements collected through this interviewing process, or to find the gaps, or to even determine, evaluate the value of requirements. So things like using ad hoc analysis to help identify root cause of the issue. For example, you have a process breakdown, or you have a bottleneck in the process. Things like identifying missing scenarios because you've analyzed data and you've looked at different unique situations that you actually see happening today. Things like evaluating the volumes of different scenarios to truly have a better understanding of what's the value of this user story versus the value of this user story. So for all of these business analysis activities, we actually can use data analysis to help us produce better requirements, groomed backlog, and to help prioritize those requirements better. Because again, we know that sometimes stakeholders prioritize based on their emotions, based on their gut feel, based on their own agenda, but data can actually help us. So that was the second area for business analyst. The last one, well, not the last one, but another very important area is your career potential. And someone was asking in the survey, like, how is it important to me as a business analyst? So not only it is important because A, it's part of your job to produce data management requirements. B, you can use data to make your analysis smarter, but also for your growth, maybe you want to try on an architecture career path, or maybe you want to go more into analytics, or maybe into project management, product management. Having those data analysis skills really can boost your chances for career growth. So that's business analyst. However, that's not all. And today we're also talking to managers and leaders and discussing why do they care? Because it's not only people who analyze the data that not only need to care about data, but kind of strive to be more articulate and understand how to use it. So decision making, improving your decision making, and again, trying to balance the gut feel and experience-based decision making was based on data, because sometimes we can get biased, especially when we spend a lot of time doing the same thing, and we may not notice the trends that would be apparent through data. So this moving from gut feel to insight-based management is important for managers. So if you are, for example, an analyst and project manager or scrum master, also encouraging the group to think of analytics requirements, especially operational analytics, can help you subtly lead those managers to make their decisions more based on insights, operational analytics, versus just gut feel or occasional exceptional scenarios. Improved communication. So again, data help us support our messages. Data helps us to understand why do we need to do what we need to do? Why are we making changes? It helps us to avoid the bias and sometimes even avoid discrimination. It helps us to increase efficiency of the operations. So again, with process improvements, there's only so much you can do just by interviewing stakeholders and looking at the process flow. However, using data and actually measuring different steps, the duration of different activities, the frequency of different flows, happy flow versus exceptions, helps you to determine what to improve in your processes. So that's more of a manager's perspective. In terms of leaders, of course, it all kind of flows up to what we expect from our leadership, decision-making at the leadership level. And sometimes leaders have to deal with so many variables, right? And then that's where analytics can help, because with those analytical approaches and by building algorithms, we are able to, say, evaluate multiple factors that for human being is very hard. If I am a leader and I look at the report that has 25 different columns and I'm supposed to look at it and get it to help me make better decisions, it may become a little bit too much information. But if all of those variables are built into an analytical algorithm, it actually may become much more human friendly to help with making those decisions. So we will talk a little bit more later today in the webinar about how we can determine requirements for such analytics that would help leaders. Data-driven strategies. So not only we are making day-to-day decisions, but strategizing what markets to develop in, what types of products are likely to be more successful, what are the groups of customers where we are underrepresented, what types of predictive analytics could be built into products to make our products smarter and more attractive. So all of those more strategic decisions also can be done with data. And finally, using visualization. So I know we all heard the words storytelling, but think about visualizing the performance of the company, visualizing how things are going, visualizing where your company is changing, and helping that visualization to drive down and explain the strategy and explain the insights and get our employees motivated for something new. So I would say that whether you are an analyst or manager or leader, data has huge value for you. So at every level, wherever you are, you also have to do what you can to support your organization in making those decisions based on data and to support quality data. So that's what we will talk to for the rest of the webinar. As always, feel free to use the comments if you have any comments today. So in terms of how do we study and what do we need to know about data and understand about data to achieve all of those things we just talked about, we have to start from the basics, from understanding what are the different types of data you encounter in your enterprise or you manage, and what value you can extract from these different groups of data. So first of all, every organization has internal data, operational data, your customer data, your sales information, your transactions, your payments. So this all is information about your day-to-day business. So you'll be creating some operational analytics based on it. You will be evaluating your performance. And of course, it is very, very important to have an accurate picture of the way things are. But that's not all. And that's what typically organizations at the lower maturity level, they just focus on internal data because it's easy, it's more accessible, they know what to do with it. And they have to work with it anyway because there are certain mandatory accounting and financial reports that have to be produced. So this is where everyone is more comfortable with. But there are other areas where we are less comfortable and look at external data. For example, market research. How can you use market research to help your company make better decisions? What about third-party data that you can bring in to enrich your internal data for more, for new dimensions for your analytics? Data from social media, customer reviews. So all of that external information that you can help evaluate customer inclinations. What is the current reputational value of your brand? What are the people saying about your latest product? And again, how you can use that information to improve things. So think about product management. If you're a product owner, a product manager, and you are developing a portfolio of products, how do you evaluate its success and its customer opinion? You will have to use a lot of external data for that. There is also distinction between structured and unstructured data, whether your data is internal or external. And again, we are much more comfortable with structured data. Those are tables, spreadsheets, things we are very used to viewing and processing. But there are unstructured sources of data as well, right? So maybe we are more comfortable with Tableau or using Excel for structured data. But what about emails and texts and different types of messaging, which would be semi-unstructured? What about images and videos and extracting information from there? Or even consumer behavior. Imagine analyzing when a potential customer goes on your websites and browses different products and looks at your recommendations and maybe puts things in shopping cart and then decides not to buy it. Would it not be valuable if you could analyze all of that online behavior and try to understand what is turning your customer off, and how to convert them, and how to sell more products. So these types of data, like unstructured and semi-structured, of course, are harder to analyze, and this is where you need more expertise. But this is why we should understand more about data to actually be able to analyze it more. So, as I say, we are focusing on both sides and on the value of both sides. First of all, we are talking about how you can use data and analytics for business analysis, and how you should use business analysis and business analysts to improve the chances of success for your projects that have a very significant data aspect, right? So let's see, what projects are we talking about? And please feel free to make comments if you have recently been on a project with significant data component or analytics component. What type of project was it? Because you will find that these data requirements, data management aspects are important for many, many types of projects. For example, you are developing a totally new enterprise system. Oh boy, you have to really be clear what groups of data will be managed, how they should be managed. Do you already have internal rules, or do you have to come up with new data governance processes? Who will own the data? So definitely lots of data aspects when you develop a completely new system. But even if you implement an off-the-shelf solution, there's a lot of data mapping involved. How does your internal data map to the data model of that product? And what is going to be the correct mapping to ensure that your data is correctly represented, and also that you are using, the data model of your solution. So I see comments in the chat about regulatory reporting at a bank. Definitely. Everybody has to do regulatory reporting of some kind, or investment reporting, investment relations, or whatever that is. And if you don't get it right, the whole company can be in trouble. But, as we say, we don't need to wait until we submit those reports to figure out we are in trouble. Instead, if we know that there are some regulatory metrics that need to be reported, we have to constantly monitor and see how the company is tracking towards delivering, your regulatory reports within constraints that are required. So preparing for regulatory reporting is also an ongoing data analysis. Digital transformation. So anytime you want to digitize existing process, go from a legacy system to a new product, there is again a lot of data assessment and data mapping, data migration involved. Integration of standalone applications, which we still have lots of, especially if you go and look at a company that existed for many years. Those companies are likely even to have more standalone applications that were done at completely different technologies. If you want to integrate them, a lot of this data analysis has to happen. Data migration, data retention, data deletion, privacy protection. So all of those legislative aspects of managing data also impact our requirements. And if you don't think of these types of requirements, data retention, data deletion, when you create a new project, you may have more issues later because you may not have the proper mechanisms built in, for example, for data deletion. Data governance program, especially if you are, if you have some audit findings about lacking data quality at your organization, and you have certain deadlines for proving that you can improve your data quality, and this is why you need to create data governance program. It becomes sometimes top priority suddenly, and there's lots of work involved. Process automation through embedded analytics. So automating your process based on smart decisions, based on predictive analytics, requires a lot of data from that process, from those operations, to be fed into your analytical systems, and it needs to be processed real time. So again, lots of requirements related to that. Machine learning, AI initiatives, like from simple examples like chatbots. Everybody wants to have a chatbot on their website now, but all the way again to predictive model and to recommender engines, to automation of complex processes and optimizations. Product design and development. Even imagine you're developing a new product. More and more we start to see products that have embedded AI features in them, right? And that we call them smart product, smartphone, smart fridge, and smart washing machine, and smart dryer. So thinking whether your product can actually benefit from some AI feature is also something we need to start thinking about. So as you see, lots of projects where we need those skills, whether you're an analyst or a leader. And of course, to have those successful projects, we need to have accurate and effective data requirements. So where do we find those data requirements? How do we get to them? So we need to work with stakeholders to gather data requirements, to analyze data requirements. And there are multiple aspects here. It's not only functional data requirements, for example, what data you need from the customer to fulfill their order, or what information do you need to know about this customer to provide them with the best service. That would be a question to a business stakeholder. But there are also legal aspects of data management. So you have to talk to your legal teams, audit teams, and so on to make sure that the data you store and manage, you do it in a legal way and you're not breaking any laws, because it can cost companies a lot of money. So that brings me to data governance policies. Again, as a company, you either have or you should have some data governance activities ongoing that define the proper ways of managing data. So if you do have a data governance group, that is definitely a source of data management requirements, and that's a partner. For every project, your data governance group needs to be your partner for determining those data-related requirements. They also are a source of information. For example, you don't want to invent new metrics or invent new definitions. Maybe your data governance team already captured and defined certain metrics, and definitely the more you can reuse what already exists, that knowledge that already used in your company, the better for you. So again, don't think that for every new project, you have to come up with all data requirements from scratch. No, you use and reuse what exists in organization as much as possible. So you work with, of course, with subject matter experts, especially if there are some data groups that maybe we don't necessarily understand or don't understand enough. Either reference data, other specific industry standards we should follow, other specific business rules, internal rules that we have to keep in mind. And again, always you have to go back to your data owners. And those data owners are also identified through your data governance programs. And finally, data architecture. If your organization has architecture team, has a data architect, definitely you want to work with them as closely as possible on any project to align and to get their guidance on data management requirements, right? Because a data architect would know probably and would be a good source of information. Where's the master data? Where is the reference data? Do we have data governance policy on this already? Is there any ongoing project that will change data sources that will impact my project, and so on? So think of all of these different, and of course, it's not an exhaustive list, but they should give you some ideas. Where are you going to get these different data management requirements? So not only from stakeholders, right? But you have to go and to work with data experts and technical experts as well. And I see a comment in the chat, definitely thinking of data impacts of other systems. So other systems have an impact on your solution, and also the other way around. If you are changing data, if you are introducing new data entities, is there a downstream effect on another process or another system or another integration? And this is again where you're going to have to work with data architects or solution architects to make sure that nothing is done in isolation and those impacts are considered. So that's the task of looking for data requirements and analyzing them and capturing them. Some examples of, and these are not just individual requirements, but group of data requirements that may have to be created for the project. Again, only examples, don't take it as an exhaustive list. I do have a course that I'll mention at the end where I give you more of a checklist of these. So think about areas like consent management. So in many countries, including Canada, we have anti-spam legislation where every company is responsible for managing consent and only sending marketing messages, digital messages to those who gave their explicit consent. Unless you manage this information, again, your company may be in trouble and end up paying fines. So we want to store information about consent given by, say, by our leads or customers. We want to capture this consent at the right level of granularity, because you know that even you as a consumer, if you give your permission to use your email address for something, it may be purposeful only for specific types of messages. And you want to do it in such a way that you're compliant with anti-spam legislation. So those are very important requirements. And sometimes they get forgotten until you have a big problem because your company gets slapped with a violation. And then everyone starts running around, and it's not a good way to do it. Another example is requirements related to data collection. So you start in any process, you digitize in a process, you introduce something new where you need to collect data from somewhere. For example, from human beings. It could be a web form for your customers to fill in. It could be something for your employees, or even bringing in data from other systems. So when we collect data from another source, we need to know, what are we collecting? What are the rules around collecting it? What are the permissible values? What are the rules around validation? How the data that we are collecting needs to align with the data we already have. So this is again where data governance comes in. Do we have reference data? Do we have standard definitions? Do we have data in other systems that we need to validate it against, and so on? And again, if we don't collect data accurately, then there is a cascading effect all over downstream on other applications. And this is where often the cause of many data quality issues is at data collection point. Data migration, another huge area. And, in our Be Mindset Circle, we recently had a whole meetup where we talked about data migration. And I asked whether anyone ever was part of a data migration project and how did they enjoy it. And the first response was, well, I have a post-traumatic disorder after that. It was half joke, but nobody likes working on data migration. It is so stressful. Usually you discover so many issues when you have to go to data migration, because you literally have to dig up everything you have and everything that could have possibly been captured incorrectly. You find all of these data discrepancies, and suddenly now you have to deal with it if you don't want to move all those problems into the new system. So data migration is not just mapping, it's also reconciling, it's dealing with problems, it's dealing with data gaps. And again, without data migration, you're not going to be successful with your new shiny and wonderful system that you just purchased, because if it's filled up with garbage data from your old system, you're going to have to struggle with the same problems. And one more area I'll cover, and I will move on because there's just too many to cover, is data protection. So there's so many laws now around protecting data. And there's a lot of even like cybersecurity issues have been elevated last couple of years, and many companies report many more cyber attacks, many more malicious attacks. So protecting data and ensuring that you only grant access according to the need and according to your internal rules, ensuring various levels of authentication, classifying the data, because again, you need to know what users are allowed to access what data based on the job they do. So working on all that is a huge, and again, it can have huge repercussions if it's not taken care of. And the other side of it, data retention and deletion. So not only we need to protect data as it's being used, we want to make sure we retain it only for as long as possible, as long as needed, and then we delete it properly, we dispose of it responsibly, and we are able to dispose of it on request. So requirements like the right to be forgotten is becoming more and more dominant, and unless you have procedures in place to delete the data on request from a customer, again, you can have some huge issues and costs in order to manage this request. So these are just some of the areas of data requirements. Let me know in the chat if you had some examples from your own, and I'll move on. So data governance. I know I keep talking about data governance, and part of our agenda today is to talk about why data governance is needed. And again, what is the role of an analyst and manager and leader in ensuring that it happens? Because that's also at the core of all data management, right? So data governance is about ensuring data quality and security. It's about setting up the rules for how data should be managed and ensuring that there are owners of each data groups so that there is responsibility and there is accountability in the organization. So quality assurance of data, right? So making sure that there are standards of quality established and then monitoring that the data in your company it aligns with those standards. And if the data is of not sufficient quality, what do we need to do? Do we highlight data quality issues? Do we track it? Do we correct it? Do we have procedures for correcting it? And going back to requirements, our data collection requirements need to ensure that we minimize data quality issues later on, right? So that's one function. Another function is data security. So when we protect the data, we protect different classes of data at different levels. It really depends on how confidential data is, how much risk is in exposing the data. So in the course that I'll mention at the end, I've covered there's 4 levels of data classification, which require different levels of protection, from no protection at all to very strong encryption. And that's also part of data governance. So whenever you work on a project that touches on data, you need to be aware how different groups of data need to be protected. And by the way, speaking of analytics, if you have some attributes that need to be encrypted through a very strong encryption, what you need to be aware of that it's getting much harder to use those for analytics, because decrypting information just to use it for analytics slows down everything and has a huge impact on performance. So there is some other ways to do it, because once your data is encrypted, it's pretty much closed down and it's very hard to get access to. The third point in terms of data governance is related to compliance and regulatory adherence. So making sure that how you store the data, it complies with regulations of what data you provide to your regulators is aligned with their metrics and definitions and requirements. So all of that is also part of data governance. So if you look at these are some pretty serious areas, and every enterprise needs to manage them, because while everything is okay, we may be focused on our products and sales, but if any of those becomes a big problem, that everything else, like your whole business, may stop until this is fixed. So whether you are an analyst or a manager, most likely you should be part of data governance activities as a data owner or as a data expert, or from business analyst perspective, to ensure that this is done as part of the project, right? So stakeholders for data governance, any business owners, right? So managers of the business teams, they may be designated data owners, they may be providing rules and definitions, they may be enforcing the data governance processes for their area. Business analysts, what do business analysts do? And some of you may be more interested in this. Whenever you work on a project, you're responsible for data management requirements, and you consult with data governance policies to make sure your requirements are accurate and that they are aligned with what is required, right? So you need to help your projects to make sure that whatever changes project is implementing will still adhere and be within those data governance policies. And you also maintain the knowledge, organizational knowledge, understanding of those definitions and metrics, and educating others. So that's how you contribute to organizational knowledge, which is also contributing to quality of data, because if everyone else has the same understanding of what this term means, this metric means, chances are they'll use it accurately. If you're a data architect, right, your job is to be responsible for that sustainable data infrastructure, for making sure that we are able to implement data governance, because if you have the rules but you don't have technology to implement it, well, that becomes pretty hard to do. Managing of your master data, managing of your reference data, so making it accessible to others. And of course, the other stakeholder is always our regulatory and compliance and legal groups, which would provide policies, procedures, directions, requirements, and often they also enforce priority when something becomes top priority. All right. Analytics. Now we talked about data management requirements a little. There's also analytics requirements. So if you're part of the process that you're working on or part of the enterprise change involves creating useful analytics to support decisions, well, where do you get those analytics requirements from and how do you do that? So there's few things. And one of the questions I got through the survey was kind of about a playbook of managing data and analytics and coming up with requirements. So these are maybe some of the points that imagine could be part of your playbook. You need to understand your personas, so your users of analytics, because we have different types of solutions from ready to use to very ad hoc and sophisticated, and you need to understand who is your user. If they just need quick, I just need some numbers because I'm doing my job, I don't have time to go look and explore, then they need a very different solution from someone who wants to explore and experiment and maybe optimize and so on. So you analyze your personas, just like you analyze different roles in business analysis. You have to ask analytics questions. So what is the goal of your analytics? What are you trying to get? What types of information you're looking after? What types of metrics do you need? So asking good analytics questions is also pretty tough. Then you work on data acquisition, on sources of data. If you came up with those analytics questions, do we have the data? Where is this data? How do we get this data? How good is this data? Do we need to prepare it? Do we need to pre-process it? Do we need to standardize it because maybe it comes from different sources? So various requirements related to preparing data, to producing analytics. And then, of course, we will actually have requirements for analytics solutions themselves. So the format, the presentation, what are the features, what are the attributes, the selection criteria. So just recently I published a video just on determining selection criteria for your reports and dashboards, and it is very important. And even embedding, if you want to embed those analytics in business process for process optimization, well, there's lots of requirements related to which activity, what type of prediction you need. Will it be assisted decision-making or automated decision-making, and what are the different conditions around it? So those would be actually the requirements to your analytics solution. So in the course that I'll mention at the end, I have a whole section just on working through and capturing analytics requirements, right? Just like you would capture functional requirements for process flows, for example. All right, challenges. Now, when things go wrong and why do they go wrong and what we can do. So there is a lot of challenges and there is a lot of statistics and survey results that tells us that quite a few data science and AI projects are failing for various reasons. And like a lot of investment which is made here is not necessarily giving back value. And sometimes that's what causes projects to be canceled and funding to be cut. So project planning. And a typical challenge that we encounter, for example, as business analysts, as project managers, also applies to analytics projects and to data science projects. So when you're unclear about your objectives, when you don't have accurate requirements, you don't have resources that understand the process or understand what is needed. And an additional challenge, of course, for data-heavy projects is underestimating the time and the effort needed for data acquisition and for preparation, because the data sources are never clean, they're never perfect. They always need to manipulate and prepare and clean and remove duplicates and wrangle the data and so on. And it requires a lot of work. And if the project doesn't allocate time for that and expects the data to be perfect, then right from the front, the project is going to be late and delayed because we just didn't have time for this. Data roadblocks. So having lacking data or having incomplete data or inaccurate data, or the data that has a lot of bias, a lack of data governance where we have data in different systems doesn't match, doesn't standardize, and we can't really align it, or we are trying to interpret the data from multiple sources, and we're not doing it correctly because maybe the lack of data governance caused these different systems to capture data in very different ways. Sometimes we have too much data and it's not managed properly. So we'll have so much data in our data lake, but we are not necessarily extracting it properly, or we're just extracting bits and pieces, or not the right dimensions. We are analyzing the attributes that are not most representative. So various roadblocks truly related to lack of data skills and lack of data science skills or understanding of challenges of data. And this is kind of the main topic for us today. What do we need to know to avoid this? And the third one is lack of collaboration, which I guess is a challenge we may be facing on any project. And it is also could be pretty painful on data science projects when things are done in silo without communication. So we end up misunderstanding or misinterpreting or creating things that don't integrate, misunderstanding of the goals, even not trusting technology. So if your data science team wants to develop something new, but then your business team does not want to use it because they don't trust it or they think it will misplace them, you will have challenges. So I guess part of what we are doing as we are learning more about data and analytics is really trying to mitigate all of these challenges and working through them. So what should I do? What should you do? What do you think needs to be done? Of course, it depends on your role, but I think that there is something you can do regardless of your role. So if you are a leader, first of all, you have to recognize the role and potential value of the data, because without leadership support, things are not going to happen. Investing in employee training is important because, again, your employees need support. If they are always on projects, they don't have time to learn, they will just be short-handed. So giving them time and space and some funding for training can be really, really crucial. Leading organizations, so supporting the idea of analytics-driven decisions and giving it the value and the importance in the organization. So that's what leaders can do. If you are a manager, supporting data governance. So if you're managing a sales team, you can't just say, oh, I don't have time for this data governance, I'm very busy, because then there will be no data governance. So providing support, giving your resources to support data governance, to ensure data quality, and helping your teams to take accountability for that. Because, and feel free to raise your hand or give me thumbs up and down if you think that your organization has super high data quality or doesn't really have enough of that. Because what I've seen mostly in my experience is there's always data quality challenges. And one of the problems is, well, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to clean the data. It's not glamorous. And often it's because managers don't support it or don't give the employees, again, time to actually help with data cleanup or help with managing the data differently. So if we as managers are not going to support data quality efforts, then it's not going to work. Yeah, and if we are, imagine our employees enter data all over the place, it's inconsistent, it's not accurate. If there is no accountability for that, or if we as managers don't support them into doing this better, nothing is going to happen. And I see a comment that someone encountered this issue today, right? There was a problem with how data is entered. So those data collection requirements perhaps weren't there, or the procedure not being followed. So that's leaders and managers. And then if you're a business analyst, your job is to learn more about data, understand different data types, understand data life cycle, and what are data management requirements that you need to define or help the team define, right? It doesn't have to be you doing everything, but you bring the inputs from data architects and data governance and business and everybody else to put those requirements together. You advocate for data governance and for data quality, you support it. You may not be able to do everything yourself, but you promote it and you remind everyone, oh, we need to have requirements that will make sure we have data quality on entry, because if you don't have accurate data on entry, then everything else is going to fall apart, right? And if you're data experts, data architect, data analyst, you provide guidance, you provide your knowledge, you guide the transformation to the data smart enterprise or analytic-driven enterprise. You share your knowledge, maybe you help train the others, and you have to look for business value, because once you can show business value to those leaders, it's usually easier to get their support, right? So these are some of the things you can do. Answering some of the questions from the survey, so I picked 6 out of that. How is knowledge data going to benefit business analysts? So hopefully I answered it today, not only because you can come up with better and more complete data management requirements for your project, but also you can use data analysis for better business analysis. For example, root cause analysis, or to find a comprehensive list of scenarios, and so on. Another question was about analysis versus analytics. Is it interchangeable? No, it's not interchangeable. They are related, but they are different. Business analysts analyze requirements for enterprise change. It may include business process changes, roles, accountabilities, communications, and of course, data as well. So data and data requirements are part of the whole business analysis. Analytics is about analyzing data in order to get insights, to learn something new, and to make better decisions. So part of business analysis could be defining analytics requirements. Analytics moving towards self-service versus guided analytics, I hope it does, and I think it does. We get more and more tools that allow sophisticated business users to create their own ad hoc report, diagnostic reporting, but that can only be done if the data is already prepared and modeled, transformed. So all of those data architecture work needs to be done. Data collection, data preparation, data wrangling, and then that all of that can enable your business users to be more independent. So it's always a good idea to have more self-service, again, with proper guardrails. But again, you have to have the guardrails, the data governance, the definitions, the security, all of it in place. So it does require work, of course. Question number 4 was, how can business analysts help with data governance, standards, processes? So I hope I answered it at least high level. Business analysts can play a big role. In many organizations, business analysts are part of data governance committees, and they are very active members. And at the very least, enforce that on your projects, data governance policies are taken into account and followed, right? You don't want to be at odds or completely disregarding data governance. That's not good for any project. Playbook approach to data and analytics. So I gave you a few ideas, like 1, 2, 3, 4 different areas. Now I will, at the end, provide information. I just published a course on data management and analytics fundamentals that will give you much more of that playbook approach with templates and steps and checklists and so on. And the last question that I've listed here today, how to learn more about data modeling, data mapping, analytics, and reporting. So there's lots of, again, sources. There's my course, there's many other courses, there's lots of videos. I have a few videos on YouTube. I know there is a lot of other experts who do amazing videos. There's courses, there's books, and you have to practice. So find someone in your organization, could be a data architect, could be a data modeler. You can learn a lot from them internally, again, using your own data as an example. So every day, literally, you can learn. So quickly, if you are interested in the course, and I'll leave some time for questions, Data Management and Analytics Fundamentals course, it's not just for business analysts, it's also for managers, leaders, for data analysts. It is the foundations that starts with understanding data structures and what is data lifecycle and what are the different requirements to be captured. How do you capture them? So things like data mapping, data dictionary, scenario matrix, SQL, basics, all of those fundamental techniques are included. If you are interested, you can use this discount code for 25% off. Here is the link, and you can use QR code. I'll also follow up with an email, and I'll send you the link as well. So definitely, if you're interested in the course, feel free. I also run mentorship group, and some of the participants today are from our group. We meet every Tuesday and we discuss different topics of business analysis, not just data related. We record all of our sessions. I think we have 18 or 19 on our sessions already recorded. If you are interested, you can join on a membership basis monthly, and you get access to all the previous recordings. Lots of other ways to contact me. Find my book, follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to answer your questions anytime.